One of the things that I've seen mixed research on, and I want to hear your thoughts, is this idea of use it or lose it, saying that if you don't have sex, you will have more atrophy.
I believe that you can always reverse the atrophy of aging.
So if you haven't been using it, it's not gone. You can get it back, which is the reason we're talking about sexual biohacking and regenerative therapies today. There's over 20 kinds of orgasms the human body can have. And because that is such an important part of health span and sex span, the orgasmic action, the actual orgasms are one of the biggest benefits of sex, of intimacy, of lovemaking, of pleasuring, solo pleasuring. So, these are things that are required. The vascularization in your brain, the detoxification, the improved sleep function, all of these things come from the orgasmic response.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Sexology Podcast. I am so excited to welcome back Susan Bratton to our show. Susan, welcome to our show.
Hello, it's so good to be back, darling. I missed you, as I told you before we started rolling. I've been looking forward to seeing you and connecting with you. So thank you. I love to see all of your success and 8 years of podcasts and 400 plus episodes. And I'm just so delighted for all of the great work you're doing in the world to help people.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I'm always inspired by the breadth and depth of the teaching that you have and the support that you provide other people. And I was just sharing with you that how every time I see you, I feel energized because of how it feels like you never age, which goes back to our biohacking conversation. Not there is anything wrong with aging, right? Like we all want to kind of have graceful aging, but I think your lifestyle kind of play a huge role in being able to age gracefully and being able to sexually active and have the life that you want. So today we're going to talk about sexual biohacking. Can you tell us a little bit about how do you define that?
Yeah. So the best way to define biohacking is that it's a term that came out of the longevity movement. And it was really Dave Asprey, a friend of mine who worked at a longevity institute. And he said that when he would have events, no one under 60 would come. So he decided to coin a different term. And he took the term from a group of tech people who were working also in parallel with something called the singularity, which is this notion that in the future, human beings will be part computer and part human, that we're starting to do, like putting nanoparticles in our body, and we've got replacement hips that are made out of titanium. And over time, we're going to have more and more componentry of our physicality becoming technology. And he coined the term biohacking. And really what it means is the things that you can do to extend not just your lifespan, but also your health span. And what I've done is I've really done a deep dive into how to extend your sex span along with your health span, because they're in many ways two sides of the same coin. The more you're able to keep your intimate pleasure going as you age, the more you can push out that health span to lengthen it. Because having great sex, and by sex, I don't just mean intercourse, though I love intercourse. I've written so many techniques on how to make love to a woman, how to have intercourse with a woman so that you're actually utilizing the way her arousal structures work, the way her vagina really is. It's not just an inside out penis. What does the vagina really want? What does her body need to have massively pleasurable and orgasmic intercourse? Because everything we see out in the world is really the kind of intercourse that a man would do if he was thinking about what he wanted. But men want to do what we want. they just don't see, we don't see examples of it. So I'm trying to, correct that to be equally pleasurable for her, because as you know, from doing your 400 episodes, so many people stop having sex, and it's more often that the woman doesn't want it anymore. And it's simply because she hasn't been getting what she needed. She'd rather give it up. And so that's what I like to fix. So the sex span, the longer you can, so I like to sometimes say sex, but define it as not just intercourse, but orgasmic pleasure. That's really the key. It's not just how you have sex, but that you have orgasms and that they can keep getting better as you age. That aging doesn't diminish your pleasure. It actually can increase your pleasure if you keep your parts, your genital structures in good working order. And that's where the biohacking piece comes in. So if having sex, and I'm just going to make that like a big category sex, not a specific category sex, if having sex makes you live longer, healthier, and a happier life, then having orgasmic sex works even better. And if you keep your parts in good order, you can keep doing that and expanding your pleasure. And so it's partly, if you think about it, biohacking is the things you can do to make your body work even better, kind of like a bionic sexuality, right? Like better, your titanium hip is stronger than your human hip, right? So how can you make your genitals titanium so they can last for 100 years? That's what biohacking is. But often where we start is further to the beginning of the line, and that's sexual regenerative therapies and treatments. Once you reverse the atrophy of the aging body, you can go on to biohack it and optimize its performance if you catch it early enough, because that's what Dave found was when he reframed longevity to be biohacking, he could attract younger people who would take care of their bodies earlier before things fell apart. So last night I was at a dinner party, and a young woman who's 40 years old said to me, I'm having diminished orgasmic response. Like, I'm saying that to you. That's not the words that she used, but that's how you and I talk to each other. And I said, okay, great. And she said, what do I need to do? And so I walked her through what to do. And when you think about the steps to reversing and then optimizing, it's often starting with regenerative and then moving into enhancement.
I love that. I love the mission of helping people to have pleasurable life throughout all stages of life. Because what happens is sometimes I hear viewers like, oh, I live for 100 years, or I wish you to live 100 years. But I'm thinking about if I'm not able to lean into pleasure, whether it's sexual pleasure, enjoying life, I might not want to have to live longer, right? I think having an orgasmic life, kind of like pleasure-filled life, is just so important. And like anything else, that with technology, we have certain changes, tools, and technology that can help people to be able to have better sexual experiences through preventative care. I know many people think like your sex life has expiration date. People kind of like ask, oh, do people come for sex therapy when they're 60, 70, or 80? I was like, absolutely. I have clients that are in 70s and 80s. They have good sexual experiences, as you mentioned. The issue is not necessarily that like you cannot have sex, you don't want sex. Sometimes the issue is that you haven't taken care of your body enough, so it would be hard for you to be able to be comfortable in your body, as you talked about, or kind of like you might have performance issues due to health issues or pain issues. So you talked about some of the innovative techniques that's been developed. Can you tell us a little bit about what's out there that help people with regeneration and improving their sexual health?
Sure. So do you want me to do the male body or the female body first? Because they're different.
Go ahead. Let's start from whoever you're going to prioritize, because I want to hear both. All right, let's start with female body.
Okay, with the female body. So the first things that women notice are diminishment of libido and desire. They notice thinning of the vaginal tissue due to estrogen loss. The vaginal tissue getting thin means that it can't hold the same amount of moisture that it used to hold because it's thinner. And so they also find that they have a loss of lubrication. Often sex can become painful, especially around the opening to the vagina, which is a sphincter muscle. And so it's a round muscle that squeezes open and closed. And it gets particularly sensitive there. If a woman has had any kind of damage throughout her lifetime, falling on her brother's bicycle bar, or riding a horse, or rough sex, or issues with childbirth, episiotomies, tearing, things like that, any of those things can also start to become more and more painful as that tissue thins with the loss of estrogen. The second thing that happens is loss of lubrication, which is actually not an estrogenic issue necessarily, though it's exacerbated by loss of estrogen. It's primarily the loss of vascularization, blood flow into the pelvic bowl, because the vagina it's a muscle. It's not a gland. It's not self-lubricating. It's not like the prostate, which makes fluid. It has to have you have to get turned on. That sets the kind of the relaxation reflex, which allows the blood to let down into the pelvic bowl. And then the blood plasma seeps through the vaginal mucosal lining to wet the vagina, to make you feel wet and to give you lubrication. The other things that happen are incontinence, and then loss of labial and clitoral tissue, basically loss of all of the genital tissue, both the skin, the vascularization, the nerves, as well as the erectile, the spongy tissue. And one of the things that women often don't understand is that if they think about their male-bodied partner and his erectile function, they think about his penis, about half of it roughly sticks out of his body, but the other half of it goes in and down toward his testicles. So it's kind of twice what you see visually. And 90% of it is spongy tissue, erectile tissue. So if you think about that, it's almost as big as a banana. And if you peeled that banana and you took the fruit out and put it in your hand, it would cover your hand. That's how much erectile tissue is in his genital structures. Well, if you took out all three erectile tissues of the female genital structure, the clitoral structure, urethral structure, and perineal structure, which surround the vagina, that is equal to that banana's worth of erectile tissue in the male partner. If I put that in her hand, it's more shaped like a teardrop than a banana, or kind of like a donut with a point. And women don't understand that they're losing blood flow. That causes the capillaries and microcapillaries to retract, pull back toward the heart and organs, which means that the nerves are no longer innervated by the blood flow, so they have to retract. And then the tissue starts to cave in, to shrink, to shrivel. And when it shrivels, we have loss of labial robustness, loss of clitoral structural robustness, loss of the ability for the erectile tissue to hold the blood in and to get filled with blood. And when all that shrivels up, you're getting less surface area. When you get aroused, blood can flow in, but not enough. And so you kind of almost think about it like having a shriveled penis, but you have a shriveled, vulvovaginal system. And when it's shriveled, it can't have the same amount of surface area. And the reason that people say your biggest sex organ is your brain isn't necessarily kind of the verbal piece of it that helps, but it's the actual sensory processing systems. And so when it shrinks and it's not as plump as it used to be, and it doesn't expand with an erection as a lady boner, a clitoral erection, then it has less surface area. So when you touch it, it's sending less signals to the brain. So you're feeling that loss of sensation, that difficulty achieving climax, etc. And so that shrinkage really gets us. So what you're really wanting to do is a combination of replacing lost hormones, topping up your hormones, as well as topping up your nitric oxide production. You can top up your nitric oxide production by eating a lot of leafy green vegetables, and beetroot. But frankly, our soils are nitrogen depleted. And it's the nitric oxide that pumps the blood around to our system. And women need to pump as much blood into our genital structures as our men need to pump blood in for their penile structures. And nobody's talking about our erectile dysfunction, our issues with this. So taking a nitric oxide booster, supplementing with I like a food-derived nitric oxide booster, and citrulline tends to be a better pathway, according to clinical studies, for people over 40. And so often couples who have a robust sex life are integrating lots of greens and beetroot, but they're also supplementing with nitric oxide. So I think that's really important. And I recommend food derived. I have a supplement company. I only make a couple of products. And one of the products that I make, it's called Flow Nitric Oxide Booster. And I make it out of watermelon rind, organic watermelon rind, powdered organic watermelon rind, organic powdered spinach, some pine bark tannins, which are very, very good for blood flow. They're kind of like the dark chocolate of blood flow. And some bitter cherry, which is vitamin C for more absorption. And once you get those nitric oxide systems topped up, you'll feel your genitals engorging better, and you'll begin to reverse that loss of sensation. But often that's not even enough. So there's more. Should I keep going or take a breath?
I have some follow-up question
Yeah,
about
go
the thing you said. I love how you have this comprehensive view of the changes, right? Because sometimes people want to kind of say, I'm healthy, hopefully I'm doing right things. But I think it's helpful to know that what are we targeting. And I think with one of the common issues that I hear from many women, as you said, it's like pain during intercourse, premenopausal or postmenopausal. That's a common one. Also, I hear the low desire. That could also be related to so many things, which could be kind of like changes in the body, changes in hormone, and also pain also plays a role.
And boredom.
And boredom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because for women, psychological novelty, it can be very important. That's something that's kind of not necessarily be considered for many people in long-term relationship. One of the things that I've seen mixed research on, and I want to hear your thoughts, is this idea of use it or lose it, saying that if you don't have sex, you will have more atrophy. What is your thoughts on that?
It's hard for me to tease out the difference between use it or lose it, because I think that it's so multifactorial in that it really depends on things like exercise, nutrition, sleep. Those things they're really big factors as well. I believe that you can always reverse the atrophy of aging. So if you haven't been using it, it's not gone. You can get it back, which is the reason we're talking about sexual biohacking and regenerative therapies today. So you may have to do more than take a nitric oxide supplement and do some estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And that really kind of leads into the next piece of it, which is, okay, if that wasn't enough, what do I do next? But it is absolutely true that the more often you fill that tissue with blood, the better and more responsive and easier it is to get it filled, and the less atrophy you're going to have. So let's just say, okay, I didn't have a lot of sex, but now I want to. And that actually happens for a lot of women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, where their circumstances have changed. Kids leave the house. They get divorced and marry somebody new. They start dating. They want to put their attention on their sexuality because they see it waning and they care about it. And so what can you do next? What's the stack? When you are talking about biohacking, a lot of biohackers use a phrase called the stack or stacking. And all it means is a series of synergistic things that you can do that work comprehensively together to give you an even greater effect. So let's just say that you start taking nitric oxide, but then you add in hormone replacement therapy. You're going to get a bigger benefit. Then you can add on the next things. And I always like to speak about biohacking as budget and intermediate and luxury options, because some people want to throw everything at it and it's their highest priority and they've got the money to spend. And other people want to do everything they can, but they're on a very strict budget. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that there exists that spectrum and that people can sometimes start with something. And then if they're seeing improvement and they want to keep going, they can add on. So what comes above nitric oxide and hormone replacement? And solo pleasuring would be the next thing. And having more frequent sexual pleasure with a partner, if you're able to do that, would be another thing. And when I recommend solo pleasuring, a lot of times what I recommend is using a variety of tools to do self-pleasuring and partnered play, because different parts of the vulvovaginal system are stimulated by different types of tools. So whether you're talking about, an external yoni massager, a vulva massager, clitoral massager, or you're talking about an internal G-spot wand or a rabbit style vibrator, which is an internal external, or you're talking about something that now there are vibrators that are inflatable, that give you a more full feeling, or vibrators that are heated, or thrusters are another example of a vibrator. There are a lot of different formats, and the more of them you use regularly, the more you're activating the different areas of the vulvovaginal system. So making sure that you're using your massage tools on the mons and the outer labia, as well as the tools, like maybe a vibrator on the clitoral structure, but then also maybe a thrusting or an inflatable vibrator to really put pressure and stimulation on the vaginal cavern to stimulate the tissue beyond the mucosal lining and into the body itself, where you're going to get more blood flow and nerve ending production and sensation to the brain. Because over time, women will say, okay, this, I can't feel anything here anymore. It's, like it's almost numb or it's painful. You can transform the numbness, the pain, and even the shame of being touched in a certain place into pleasure with loving, pleasurable sensation. It's never too late to transform the tissue into pleasurable sensation. That's what I like to call orgasmic activation and orgasmic cross-training, where you're actually learning how to have more orgasms more easily with more intensity and more frequency that last a longer time. The moment of climax is expanded. All of these dimensions of the orgasm can also be amplified with stimulation. So I think it's very important that women understand that the kind of orgasm or orgasms they have now are just the tip of the iceberg, and that you can train your body to have many. There's over 20 kinds of orgasms the human body can have. And because that is such an important part of health span and sex span, the orgasmic action, the actual orgasms are one of the biggest benefits of sex, of intimacy, of lovemaking, of pleasuring, solo pleasuring, not just doing it because you're close, doing it for the oxytocin generation or the touch or the rebooting of your nervous system, but the actual cascade of neurotransmitters and hormones, the release of, the increase of IGF-1, the release of natural killer cells, the release of endorphins. These are things that are required, the vascularization in your brain, the detoxification, the improved sleep function. All of these things come from the orgasmic response. So when a woman says, I just can't orgasm, I say, oh no, you just can't orgasm yet. What have you tried? Let's dissect it. Let's figure out what it's going to take for you to get over the edge so you get that pathway going. So then you can add more pathways and become massively orgasmic. So I think that's very important, is the tools. And then there are steps from that. One is using a do-it-yourself at-home vaginal restoration device. I'll circle back to that. Or going out and getting vaginal rejuvenation treatments. There are only some I recommend. There are some I do not recommend. And I can tell you why. And then above that is kind of the even luxury area, which would be the use of PRP, platelet-rich plasma, exosomes, and now stem cells, both exogenous and endogenous stem cell injections into all of those erectile structures to regrow tissue. So the VFit, the vagina device with red light therapy, warmth and vibration you can use at home for intravaginal stimulation, increasing the glycogen levels of the vagina so that your good bacteria are getting the food that they need to keep your vaginal dysbiosis down and things like that. Going to gains wave, acoustic wave, shock wave treatments rather than lasers and RF devices that only do the vagina but don't do the entire clitoral areas, which is what women complain bitterly about, is that loss of sensation. And the RF and those kinds of devices, they're only going up inside. They're not doing the clitoral structures. Or the labia, the saggy labia. You don't want that stuff saggy. You would like it to be plump. And then the stem cells, the exosomes, the PRP to accelerate new tissue growth for reversing atrophy. So that's kind of the arc of the female possibility of regenerative therapies and biohacking.
I love that. And I heard about most of them. I have my reservations at times because that's a challenge with preventative care, right? Like you're trying to prevent something. Yeah. And if they're doing their job well, you're preventing it. So you don't know if it was a investment worth making. So as far as procedures, like for example, with PRP, I've seen like for legs, for face, for all sorts of places people use. If people want to choose like one, kind of invest in one thing, what would you say they would get better return of investment based on your own experience? Of course, everyone's situation is different.
I think it really depends on what their issue is. If it's incontinence and painful intercourse and loss of sensation, the very first thing I would do is I would get gains wave treatments because they are holistic. All the entire vulvovaginal complex gets stimulated with new tissue growth. It's the single biggest bang for your buck, excuse the pun. So to me, that would be the number one thing. If I couldn't afford $1,500, I might consider, if I only had like a little loss of lubrication, a little bit of painful sex intravaginally, a little tiny bit of incontinence, I might be able to just start with the vagina device, the red light device, with the warmth and vibration for recollagenation and Kegel toning. That might be worthwhile. Would I just do an O shot? No. I would choose gains wave. For $500 for an O shot versus $1,500 for gains wave, I would choose gains wave. But I've done it all.
Does O-shot work at all? Because none of my clients say I feel like they had good results.
Here's how PRP works. PRP is a very unusual methodology, and it was an early kind of 1.0 methodology. I prefer stem cells, but they are more expensive. PRP takes about 90 days to achieve full effect, and often by the time someone seeks an O-shot, they have significant atrophy, which means that they need 3 or 4 treatments over a year to actually get that tissue regenerated. And what happens often for women is that what PRP does is it essentially, it calls your healing and it does essentially tells your body that you've been damaged and that your body sends out signals that say, come heal this. And when your body heals it, it rebuilds tissue. But if you're significantly atrophied, then it's just not going to get you where you need to go. That's why the acoustic waves are very, they go all through the tissue. So they help with everything. And so I just think that if you're going to do PRP, know that took me 3 O shots and patience in my mid 50s to rebuild that tissue. And this was before stem cells were even available. Now I have harvested my own stem cells and I keep them at American Cell Technology. And when I need 10 million of them, they culture them for me, grow them out, takes about 3 weeks, and then they ship them FedEx to my doctor. If you ever want to have him on, he's really nice. His name is Dr. Jeff from Recelebrate. He's in Vegas. And he's my stem cell doctor because I've had to do a number of treatments of stem cells. I tore my ACLs and MCLs. I had a lot of long haul COVID damage. So I'm doing more than just genital rejuvenation with Jeff. And the stem cells are very nice because they don't do the wounding to get the regrowth. They just do the regrowth, which I think is better. So in the future, I believe that women won't be getting O shots of PRP. They'll be getting O shots. And O shots a brand. And lots of people do PRP. But the problem is that there are a lot of machines out there. And they're different machines. And you can't always know what centrifuge they're using, what PRP kit they're using, those kinds of things. So it's always really good to go to, that's why they have like O-Shot as a brand and Gainswave as a brand, because you want to go to a trained practitioner. You do not want someone messing around with your genital structures who is just like doing an off-brand, process.
Well, Susan, I can ask you questions, like so many different questions about vulva for vulva owners, but I know that good size of our audience are men, and they're waited this long. So tell us about the biohacking kind of like material technologies out there for penis owners.
Mm-hmm. Well, penis owners have so many competitive advantages sexually. It's so interesting. I mean, they get nighttime erections when they're healthy. They wake up with morning wood. They get tons of testosterone. It makes them nice and horny. They have much less, libido loss, although certainly with the endocrine disruptors in our plastic society now, men are struggling more with that. And that is true. And that's happened just over the last less than 10 years. We've really seen a lot of men struggling with low libido and loss of desire as well. But they also have the benefit of being able to use a penis pump, a vacuum erection device. VEDs are given out by urologists. They're an FDA class 2 treatment, if you will, a device that draws blood into the penis, and you pump 2 to 3 times a week, every other day or so over time. And by using the vacuum pressure in the cylinder, it pulls the blood into the penis and it expands those capillaries, those micro capillaries out to the edges to regain the blood carrying capacity of the erectile tissue in the penis, because that's what happens for most men. What they have is venous leak. Venous leak being this inability to get enough blood in, and then the endothelial cells of the vascular system get stiff. It's hardening of the arteries. We've heard our grandparents talk about that, and it happens in the penile arteries as well. And so they can't get the blood in and then lock off to hold a firm erection. Guys get bendy. They're not as firm as they used to be. They don't have this nice thick, ropey veins full of blood in the penis. You can barely even see a vein. They look very wan as they age. And so when you use a vacuum erection device, it's made for pumping the penis and then putting a constriction ring on to trap the blood in. But it's used off label for what's called male enhancement, which is penis enlargement. And it works absolutely wonderfully. I have helped nearly 250,000 men use a penis pump, and you have to use the right one. You have to have the right protocol, and you have to follow the directions, because you can hurt yourself doing it wrong. You can bruise, you can pull you can kind of like pull your penile skin and stretch it funny. You can overpump and cause sensation loss. And guys, they always want to go to a level 11. I can take it. But this is our biggest issue with penis pumping, is telling guys they have to go low and slow for the best results. And so what men can use are penile traction devices in combination with vacuum erection devices that will both grow length and girth. So you can reverse the atrophy, which is the regenerative part. Then you can go on to enlarge, which is the optimizing performance part, which is the biohacking. And the question that everyone asks me right at this moment is, does it last? And I say that it's very, very similar to bodybuilding, where you go out and you get swole, you get your big muscles, and then you have to maintain them. And it's a lot easier to maintain the gains than it is to get the gains. So the heavy lifting is the first 10 to 12 months of consistent pumping gives you 20 to 25% overall penile volume increase. I've written a book. It's a PDF. It's a downloadable book. It's at pumpingguide.com. It's a free download. It tells you why the pump I recommend is the pump I recommend, what the different pumping protocols are depending on your needs and goals, how to use stretchers with it, what kind of lube to use, how to know you're at the right pressures, all the millions of questions that guys have. And that's at pumpingguide.com. So it really works. Men absolutely love it. And there's hardly a man. I mean, Nazanin, for us, in a way, as women, it's like you can never be too rich or too thin. For men, you can never have a penis that's too big. It just makes men feel very confident. So I love that it's both something that can be reversing the loss of tissue and erectile firmness, as well as then getting bigger when you get out of the shower and you catch a glimpse of your penis and you're like, oh God, it looks bigger, and then you get an erection and it's bigger than it's ever been, and you're just like super psyched about that. And that's a very nice thing. P shots work as well. Go back to, P shot exosome stem cell, luxury, budget to luxury. You can add those in. They accelerate the growth, and you can do gains wave treatment. So pumping with gains waves and PRP or stem cells is a triple crown. It's the winning combo for men, plus nitric oxide and testosterone.
Thank you for all of that. Yeah. Wonderful tips and strategies. And I know what I always make a joke with my female therapist friends that like men are so motivated. They're like, say, okay, there's a solution, I'll go get it. I think with women, sometimes there's more reservation. So I bet that our listeners are very excited about this kind of like actionable strategies. What do you think about injections for girth for penis owners? I know those are popular. Do you think are those workable? Do you see the pros of it? Or you think kind of the vacuum device with gain weight will give people better results?
Well, there's a couple of, I think it's conditional. If you're going to get the fillers in your penis, then it's not going to last. It's like getting Botox or fillers anywhere. You're going to metabolize the material, the hyaluronic acid, and it's just going to disappear. So if you have a date on Friday and you don't have 3 months to pump your penis, and you want to look bigger and you have the money, do it. But I would always go for the long-term win, which to me is a pump. And it's so easy and it works so well that I wouldn't bother getting fillers that are ephemeral compared to getting a pump, which you can just simply maintain.
That's incredible. And you talked about testosterone. And I know with testosterone, you can get it through food, you can get injections. There's so many different ways of getting it. How would you recommend people to kind of explore what would be a right option for them?
Well, I'm not a doctor, so I only have my knowledge of working with, thousands of men for 2 decades.
Very small data.
My data set is vast. What I have found that men have been most happy with is testosterone suspended in a cream that they rub on their balls in the morning. And that, transdermal absorption tends to do well, and it has some faster effect on the erectile function, which is often why they're doing it. And the pellets for me are not as optimal because you get a high at the beginning, but by the end of the month, you've got nothing left and you have to keep going back to the doctor, which men don't like. I mean, you can get a prescription delivered to your door and they like to touch their balls anyway. So why not? So I just think the transdermal is better, and men don't want to give themselves injections. Men hate injections. I actually think there's a genetic snip that a lot of men have where they're really, really allergic to injections. I'm the chief advocacy officer of an STI at-home testing company. You get a kit, like a COVID kit kind of, and you keep it at home. So when you want to get tested, you just do the little collection. You don't have to even prick your finger anymore. There's a little collector. You just pop it on your arm and press the button and it collects the blood painlessly. This is where we're going with medicine now, is that you don't even have to go make an appointment, go into your Quest or your lab and get a phlebotomist to take blood vials out of a needle out of your arm, or that's gone. It's over. You don't have to do that anymore. And so I think men are particularly happy to not have to go to a phlebotomist because they just don't like needles. They get faint. It makes them really feel terrible for some reason. I think there's some interesting genetic thing there. So I think overall, that's kind of where I would net out is ball cream.
Easy, efficient, and you can do it at home.
Yep.
That's amazing. Susan, as always, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. I know that you feel like you would full so much knowledge and information on your website, and the content that you produce is excellent. So for our listeners that they want to kind of gather more information about biohacking, about the products that you have, what are some of the places that you recommend them to go?
Yeah. I think the easiest way to kind of be in my world is to go to betterlover.com. Intimate wellness is only one of the 3 things that I do. I am an author of passionate love-making techniques, like my orgasmic intercourse techniques and things like that. And I also talk a lot about bedroom communication skills. I teach very, very easy bedroom communication skills, so people really get talking about what's going on with them. And then, of course, the intimate wellness. And if you subscribe to my newsletter at betterlover.com, any email that you get from me, you can reply to, and I personally get it. So if there's a question that I didn't answer in this conversation today with Dr. Muali, I'm happy to answer it, and only I get those replies. So it does go directly to me. So feel free to ask me. I'm always happy to help people out. And usually what I can do is point you to an article I've written or an ebook that I have that's free that gives you the answers that you need. So we really do all have the same operating system and the same parts. And whatever is going on with you is likely something I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. So happy to point you in the right direction. So betterlover.com is how to get into my world. And you can also follow me on Instagram. My name is Susan Bratton, Bratton. That's how you munge that all together in one word, and you'll find me on Instagram.
Beautiful. The link to the resources will be in the show notes. Susan, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a pleasure to see you and have you on this show. And hopefully that we'll see you in many decades to come.
Yeah, let's do it. Keep going, Mama.
Love it.